And we're back. Welcome to Honest Faith Conversations. Thank you for sticking around after the break. I am Miguel Covarrubias.
And I'm Kathy Covarrubias. And today, since it's October, we're going to start with some spooky stuff. Today we're going to talk about the movie. I was like, I was going to call it the show, but it's a movie, Babadook.
And even though it came out a few years ago, I know not everybody has seen it, so spoiler alerts.
It's on Netflix. Go watch it. It's been on Netflix for a while, so do it.
Do it. So brief summary and review. My summary would be that mother and child kind of go through the motions after 6 years after. Almost 7 years after the death of her husband, which was on the date of birth for her son. So her son doesn't really know the father, and some craziness ensues.
That's my line. You can't just do that. Steal my stuff. How dare you?
You always get on me for not giving it off. I thought that was enough.
Okay, so, and my summary is that a single mom is struggling to be a single mom, as well as trying to deal with her grief after losing her husband. And her and her son get terrorized by a being, and it ends with them in a sunnier place in life, I guess.
The colors were a lot brighter.
Yeah, the colors were brighter. Yep.
As far as review, I really enjoyed Babadook. I mean, it's an Australian film, I believe,
yes.
And it was just very well done. And in fact, most horror movies don't faze me as much as they do normally. And this one scared the crap out of me.
Oh, it did? I didn't realize that you were that scared.
Yeah, it was like the entire time I'm like, what's going on? What's happening? And afterwards, it was one of those horror movies that I was just very good, very well done. It was not about the gore. It was not about any of those like psychological torture like most horror movies do. It was more an actual horror movie where it actually had a point. It actually had a theme, and so we're going to talk about that theme. But
let's talk about
that's
it.
my review.
Nice. I also liked it. My way of dealing with scary movies is by partially watching it, by also like being on my phone at the same time, so then I can look away if something scary is happening, so then I don't have to focus on it so much.
Well, you also find fault in it too, and you're like you like really exclaim the fault, and you're like, oh, that would never happen.
I do, because I have to do that in order to make myself feel comfortable, because I'm like, if that could never happen, so I know that this isn't a real thing, even though I know it's not real.
There was so much during the movie last night that you're just kind of like, no, that wouldn't happen.
Like what? For example?
She's gonna do this. She's gonna do this, and it doesn't happen. So,
well, there's you have your way of dealing with watching horror movies. I have my way. Don't judge.
I'm not. You're the one that enjoys horror movies.
I do, but I enjoy them in the morning. So then I have the whole day in the daylight to process it, so I'm not so scared at night.
Okay.
But we happened to have watched this at night while our son was asleep, and
yeah,
it didn't give me that time. But it was fine. I feel better now. I'm not so scared. I think what I really liked about it was, like you said, there was like an actual theme, and by the end of the movie, like, it was clear cut, like, what it was about. It wasn't like trying to like pick it apart and going like, what did it mean? What did it all mean? Like, you knew what it meant.
Yeah, like Saw's theme is a little, kind of hidden more in the plot than it is, more obvious. This one is kind of obvious, though with some deeper symbology, kind of thrown in.
Yeah. Like, I knew halfway through that who was doing the book.
Yeah.
Like, or who wrote it. Like, I knew, I was like, oh, well, they said she's a children's author, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, I mean, this is all. It was very much about grief, and you kind of see that throughout the entire movie. And there's little hints and nods to it, but it really, I think, really comes to a head when she is possessed by the Babadook. When she starts saying everything that was on her mind. Yes, I blame you. It should have been you that was killed rather than the husband, and she doesn't know how to control him. And I think that's very much. I know there have been several people who have reviewed and picked the movie apart and said it was just about grief. That it's more complex than that. That grief is a complex emotion, and it's more the survivor guilt. It's more the anxiety of parenting. It's the stress of parenting.
If you're in this kind of circumstance.
Yeah. And so for her, this was, the whole bundled thing was the Babadook. And that, her writing, if the book was actually real, it doesn't really matter if it was or not, but then yes, she was the one that wrote it, and she may have not consciously wrote it. It may have been one of those like really late night things where her son really wasn't sleeping, and so she was trying to, do something that she doesn't remember, which, we do that, especially when we suffer through some of these things. And if you've heard any of our former podcasts, especially talking about our own struggle with having a family, with our miscarriages and everything else like that, that we've gone through a lot of grief in our own life. And one of the things that I found that I had done was I ran away from my grief. I ran away from feeling that, because I replaced it with being strong and caring for you and caring for other people. And I replaced with youth ministry. That's what I was doing. I was being a youth minister and caring for other people's children, rather than the fact that we couldn't have kids, or if we couldn't have kids, or even struggling with that. And so I know I wrote about this before, and I talked to you about this during that time, was that I felt like I packed away all of those emotions. I packed it all away because I didn't want to feel that pain. I didn't want to encounter that pain. And for me, that very much, when I do that, it does end up coming out in bad ways. It comes out as anxiety, as really bad anxiety, and PTSD around my work. And, almost everything to me at that point seems like people are out to get me, that somebody's out to get me. And she just displayed symptoms of this throughout the entire thing. It's very much that bottling up and running away from your problems. And for everybody, that running away looks different. And for some people, it's actually exercising, so they're literally running away from their problems. You have people who turn to drugs and alcohol and all kinds of things just to run away from their problems. And see, this is the weird thing, is that so many people want to try to treat the addiction, but the addiction is a symptom of the larger problem, is that they're not letting their emotions out, that they're not really encountering their emotions and feeling what they feel. They're running away from it. And I feel that so often that, well, I'll get to this here in the where we should go part, because it is controversial, but in most faith communities, people don't address these issues. We put on these masks and these happy faces, especially in these churches, because they want to seem like their life is together, that they are really holier than the rest of the world, and they're not. But we'll get to that. Yeah.
Sorry, something just kind of sparked my mind for a second. So I feel like, too, that, like, the whole church is in a grieving status right now, because there's so many people who are leaving. Huge chunks of people are leaving the church right now. And so the people who are left in the church are grieving that loss. And so a lot of it has been coming out with a lot of anger.
Oh, yeah. Well, anger, and then complete denial of the situation.
Yep.
And it's and I think the biggest schism for a lot of people was this past election was Trump, and how people are very forgiving of 45 and all of his
Lies
and misdealings and all of this other stuff that he's doing that's very not Christian. And yet they want to completely put that on people who are leaving, and that's not healthy either. But we'll get to that because that's off the topic of the Babadook, so we're going to stay on the movie topic. But as the book said, by kind of ignoring him makes him stronger. By not acknowledging him, it makes it stronger. And it very much is that when people bottle up their feelings, when people push them aside and push them down, that it ends up becoming worse. In fact, there's a great Simpsons episode where Stan Lee is actually in that episode because Homer becomes the Hulk, as it were, because Bart's doing comic strips about Angry Dad. I think that's what the episode is called, is Angry Dad. But he's told to bottle those emotions up, and it comes out as boils on him. And I think that's very much how it is that on our souls, on our spirit, on our psyche, that it ends up becoming those boils that, we do become these hideous creatures that become stronger and stronger because of those emotions that we push aside. And when they do finally come out, they become these destructive, like almost, I hate to use war metaphors, but I think it's probably most apt in this situation. But we do become like atom bombs in ourselves. We do become, as people say, like powder kegs or ticking time bombs. It's because people don't actually feel what they're supposed to be feeling. They don't, because they've been told by whomever that it's not okay or that it's a sin or whatever. And I'm pretty sure for the mom, and I keep forgetting what her name is, but
I'm usually the one that writes down the character names because I'm like, if we don't write it down, we're gonna forget. And you're like, whatever, Kathy, I'll remember. And look what happened this time. I didn't write it down, and you forgot.
Well, I remember the son's name. I remember Samuel, so that's it. But
so this is both our faults.
Both of our faults. I don't think, and this was the thing, she wasn't getting support. And people were not supporting her. People were not allowing her to grieve. They were not allowing her to put those emotions out there. And she felt like she needed to be strong for Samuel. And I can just imagine what their life was from that point, that she kept repressing all of her emotions and all of her feelings just in order to take care of her son, what she felt she needed to do to take care of her son. Which, as airlines put it, is fix your own breathing apparatus before trying to help someone else.
Yep.
And see, the thing is, it makes it stronger. Very much so. And I can attest to that over the course of, what was it, 2013. And our son was born in 2016. So those 3 years really did make it stronger. It made me not appreciate my life as much as I should have. It made me extremely paranoid. It made me very anxious about everything. And, I realized that. I realized that we really didn't enjoy the pregnancy because we were so worried that something bad was going to happen again. And I think that a lot of it had to deal with that. I couldn't picture the future with being a father and sharing all these fun things with my son, because that was all wrapped up in my emotions from the miscarriage and from all that I've been through. And so I think that this year really helped with allowing me to just kind of...
Well, you actually sought help for it for the first time.
Yeah. Well, as it were, I let the Babadook in. Is that I actually felt what I was feeling. And
in a safe environment, too.
Yeah, exactly. In a safe environment. Was that, I I really, as we've said many times before, and a lot of what we talk about in our podcast here is about mental illness, because that's a large theme in Hollywood, especially, is because it's okay to seek help. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to feel whatever it is that you're feeling, because honestly, that's what you're feeling.
Yeah.
And it's okay to feel that. You need to let it out. You need to let it in and talk about it with people and just really just feel what you're feeling.
And you also have to do the fine line of making sure that you don't make a bad decision solely based on how you're feeling at that moment.
Exactly.
Like, it's okay to, like, to imagine, like, doing something that would be ridiculous, but just make sure that you are surrounding yourself with enough safe spaces, I guess, or safe individuals to have them point out that, like, hey, you can't just, move to Florida because something happened. Like, you can't just, like, pick up and move. Like, moving is not going to, like, fix the situation, and kind of have them be there to kind of help you work through it.
Yes, I run. I run from my problems. So, it really does. It does matter how you encounter these things. And honestly, the biggest thing that to me I couldn't figure out was the symbolism of the worm. Until somebody else pointed the line from Shakespeare saying the worm does turn. And so yes, everything can turn. That you can turn the grief into something good and something positive. You will always have the Babadook in your basement, but
yep, and that's the thing. Like grief may never go away, and that is fine. That's completely okay. I mean, if you're the type of person that it's always going to be in the back of your mind, as long as you're able to recognize that and are healthy about it, that's okay. I know that when after the miscarriages, I had a lot of people who were just like, I can't believe you're still grieving over this. Like, I can't believe you're still thinking about this.
I was so upset at that too.
Yeah, and I think it hurt the worst because it was coming from a family member who had experienced something similar to it. And I was just like, everybody grieves differently. Everybody should know that everybody grieves differently. So you shouldn't tell me how to feel or how to process this.
Or how long it should take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and even though we have Peter right now, like I still am saddened by our miscarriages. It's not as much as it used to be because of, time has gone past. However, it still sucks.
Oh yeah, it still sucks. It will always suck. And, as you said, you will always have grief with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you can't just assume that people grieve like you as well. And I think that that's what was going on with my circumstance when they told me, like, I should move on, is because that the way that they grieve is completely different than the way that I grieve. I'm one of those people that, I'm still saddened by, like, I had a friend in high school who died tragically in an accident. And, I still get sad occasionally about that when I think of him, but it's not like he's on my mind all the time.
Yeah.
And the way that I grieve, too, like, as soon as something bad happens, of course, I usually, like, cry for a good couple of hours. But then, like, the next day or so, like, if I have work the next day, I'll go to work. Mm-hmm. And I will still, like, do my job. Most people won't know what's going on, but I have to do that because it's better for me personally to just keep life moving on, to feel some kind of normalcy, in order to, like, remind myself that life has to keep moving on. And I know a lot of people can't do that right away. So I'm not going to be, like, going to somebody who's upset and who is grieving and saying, well, why didn't you go into work? Yeah. Like I'm not about to do that because me personally, I need that stability. Or else I'm just going to, like, cry the whole day and that's not going to do anything for me. And I don't know, you grieve differently too.
Yeah, I do. A lot of the time, well, because I am an introvert, and I usually try to find ways to get by myself, to be alone, and to think and process. Is yeah, oftentimes it was work, especially because it was at the church, and even just being in my office helped me to process. And I really liked it when my office was not some place where people just walked into randomly, which is why I so often liked being in offices that were kind of hidden away.
Yeah.
At one church, it was fine because I was kind of like on the opposite side of the secretary, and so people would turn to go to the secretary first before even acknowledging my door. So, yeah, I try to find ways to be alone. I try to find somebody to deal with it, not to deal with it, but more for me to vent to, to talk to about it, especially with being angry. And, well, Matthew Santoro just put out a video on his channel on YouTube called...
we should link to it too.
Yeah, I will. I Never Told You, something I never told you. Anyway, he's talking about his depression and how he feels angry a lot of the time. And that's, kind of how I feel. I do feel angry a lot, and especially these days with a lot of stuff that I see going on in the country with just a lot of people claiming Jesus. Jesus wants us to do this, or Jesus wants us to be this. And there was only one commandment that Jesus ever gave. That was to love one another as I have loved you. That's the only commandment. He said, I give you a new commandment. That was it. And so people are turning all these other things into Jesus' names. And yeah, I'm angry. And for me to process that, I have to stand up for people who are voiceless, in my opinion. I have to say, no, that's not what Jesus wants us to do. What Jesus wants us to do is to love one another. And how can you love somebody by also saying that they're not welcome here? Anyway, so that's why I don't often refer people to my personal Twitter page, because that one is more of my saying, look, you need to love people, and you can't love people by hating them. That's not how it works.
Yeah. And I think it's also important to remember, too, that if you are grieving, and if somebody does give you some advice that you don't need right now, it's okay to call them out on it.
Yeah.
Because the only way that people are going to stop saying those terrible, horrible things, like everything happens for a reason. Gosh, I hate that phrase so much.
Or just pray about it, or I'll pray about it. By the way, faith and prayer without action does nothing. It says so in the book of James. It says so throughout the Bible that, if somebody comes to you for help, give them help.
Yeah.
That's exactly what the whole turn the other cheek thing is about, is giving people help that need help.
Even if you can't, give them the help that they need, at least try to give them the resources. Do something.
Exactly.
Don't just, let it be. And don't criticize the way that they grieve either. If you come upon somebody who is grieving, don't be mad at them for grieving. Don't be upset with them for grieving, or think that they are overreacting. Because you don't know. You don't know their life.
You're not in my head. You're not the boss of me.
And it's because I've also been criticized for the way that I've grieved too, and it did not help, because then I felt guilty. I'm like, oh, well, what? Why am I grieving this way? Am I grieving the wrong way? Am I overreacting to something? And no, the answer is no. Whenever you're grieving for something, you're not overreacting.
That's why why my mantra was so important to me, and why it's become my new mission to spread it, is that I think it is so much better than that. Is to tell somebody who's grieving, or tell somebody who's going through something, that they aren't alone, that they matter, that their feelings matter is because I want them to know that your grieving process is your grieving process, and I will be here for you because I have stuff to grieve too. And you're not alone in this. None of us are alone in this. It's this weird thing we call life.
Yep. And if you haven't eaten, let me know. I'll make you a casserole.
Yeah. I'll do what I can. I like to cook, so let's do it. Let's eat. That's how I run away from my problems, is by eating them. And unfortunately, I've been doing more of that recently than I should have.
That's all right. I still love you.
So where should we go from here? One of the things that I've encountered, by the way, this is on my personal Twitter. I've been blocked by a few people this weekend. And it was primarily over the fact that they were saying that Jesus and Scripture is enough for counseling. And that is so far from the truth that I want to call it false, but I can't call it false because I think the whole false thing has kind of lost its meaning. So I'm just going to say that it's far from the truth.
Yeah.
Extremely far from the truth. And
I mean, it can be tools to help you with, but sometimes you do need to go see an actual legit professional who knows what they're doing, who has a degree, who's been in a practice for quite a long time.
It's because everybody's situation is not cut and dry. It is not black and white. Nothing in life is black and white. And that's dangerous to say that the Bible works for everything or that Jesus works for everything, is because no, everybody's going to go through something different. And it's complex. It's a complex issue. No one spiritual community has the full answer to anything. And that's why you need to go to see somebody to get help. That's why you need to seek professional help. It's because those are people who have been trained to help disseminate complex information and to boil it down to simple terms to help people understand what they're going through and to help them work through it and to give them the tools to work beyond that. Which is what I discovered through therapy this past year, was that I had tools. Yes, I had plenty of tools. I worked through it a lot, but the problem was that I didn't know how deep it went, and I didn't know exactly how to deal with how deep it went. And so I was given tools to do that, to see that I wasn't alone and that I mattered. And one of those tools was writing, and it was doing these things. These things helped me feel less alone. And I hope it helps other people out there feel less alone too. Those of our listeners who may think, we're just weirdos that talk about pop culture and finding moral philosophy in our pop culture icons.
Yeah, that's just us.
That's what I do.
That's just me.
And I think that the church as a whole, everybody, this is not just Christian churches. This is Jewish synagogues and temples. This is mosques and Islamic learning centers, and all of these places should support grief and mental illness, and because they're the triage. They're the triage for these places. When they see that somebody is dealing with something else, they need to refer them out. And in fact, I was required by law, every single church that I worked for, to report when I saw some of these things going on. When I saw somebody who was going to hurt themselves or others, I was required by law. Therefore, all churches, all priests, all pastors, all spiritual leaders need to be required to report that, to refer people to see somebody who is professional. It can even be a person from your faith. And more often than not, I would recommend that you see somebody that is not of your faith so that they can be a little bit more objective about what you're going through. But that's just me. So I really do feel like this is something that we should do as a people from here on out, is to support grieving, support mental health. Let people know that they're not alone in their grief. Let them know that it's okay to feel whatever it is that they're feeling, because it's them feeling it.
Yep.
And I feel like if the mom had that, now that I can't remember her name whatsoever.
I should have looked it up. But...
Yeah, I know. now that you can write us a comment or something, or
Be like, it's Janet, or it's
not Janet.
I know it's not Janet. It's not Stephanie. It's not Carol.
I think it starts with an A.
Amber.
No.
I'm
We're not
the
going to go
C.
through A. If she had the support system, I don't think this would have happened.
Yeah.
I think she would have written a better kid's book about actually grieving stuff instead of this horribly terrifying pop-up book with these horrifying pop-up images.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that grief is one of those things that you should deal with it sooner rather than later, because the longer you wait to deal with it,
The stronger it gets.
yeah, and it's going to be harder to deal with. That's why when somebody passes nowadays in America, funerals typically happen within at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Like services are held relatively quickly because we know that people need to deal with their grief sooner rather than later, or else it's going to get out of hand.
Well, and I think that's how a lot of these things develop. How PTSD and how some major anxiety disorders can develop is because people don't deal with them on good amount of time. Mm-hmm. Is that they're not allowed to, in other words.
Yep.
Society says, no, you need to move on this quickly. And then if you're still dealing with it beyond then, well, you're SOL.
Yep. I feel like so what we're saying is when something in your life happens and you are grieving, you need to make sure that you start the grieving process sooner. But if it takes you longer in the grieving process to kind of move on, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you need to start it sooner rather than later.
When you have a boss that says, take all the time that you need, take all the time that you need.
Yep. Yep.
And it's for everybody, it's going to be different. Even if it's something that you feel is trivial, like not being able to date your ginormous crush, it's fine. Take the time that you need. People are going to tell you that, you shouldn't be grieving like this or whatever because it was trivial. But no, it's something to you. It meant something to you. Mm-hmm. So, which is, we have a friend that's kind of going through that right now. And at first I did feel like, oh, that's a little trivial. But, when I started to think about it, I was like, well, it's not trivial to her.
Yeah. Well, and stuff like that, anytime that I think what grief really boils down to is loss of a future.
Yeah.
It doesn't
loss
matter.
Of one of your perceived futures.
Yeah. And so when something like that happens, I think that's why so many people were having trouble understanding why we were grieving our miscarriages, because it's not like we had a physical baby like that we could hold,
Yeah.
It's it was something that was, minuscule. So they didn't quite understand, but it wasn't necessarily the loss of like an actual child. It was the loss of a potential future.
Exactly. And our dreams for that future. Mm-hmm. And it's, that's kind of why I titled the book The Boulevard of Broken Dreams. And, all of these things, that is very much it. It's grieving the loss of those dreams that you had. Mm-hmm. Those potential futures that you had. All right, so moving on. On to happier topics. We have a schedule for the things that are coming up. Next week, we will be doing The Walking Dead season premiere.
It premieres tonight, but we can't watch it tonight. We're gonna watch it later. That's my song for...
Well, we could watch it tonight, but you still need to do our sign up for our free trial. So.
Yes. Yay for free trials.
Next week, we will be doing Stranger Things season 2.
Woo!
Very much looking forward to that. That comes out on Friday. So
yep, so get your Egos ready.
Get your Egos ready. Your Ghostbuster costumes ready.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else that you need for that ready?
Your
80s nostalgia.
Yes. Your mullets.
Your mullets.
Your huge spectacles.
Your rat tails.
Ooh, no.
Your Rush t-shirt.
Okay, yes, the Rush. No, the rat tails. Rat tails, we're just going to cut those out. Just trim that a little
Then
bit.
the week after that, in 3 weeks, we will be doing Mind Hunters Season 1.
Apparently, it's really good.
We have yet to get started on it, but we will today probably.
Who knows? Who knows what we're going to do the rest of the day? It's Sunday, and we don't got plans, and that's glorious.
Yep. So if you got feedback on any of these things, if you would like to give your input in where you found moral philosophy in any of these things, please give us a call at 720-372-3879. Again, our show is called Honest Faith Conversations. Remember, it doesn't have to do with faith. It is really just moral philosophy.
Yes.
So what we call faith is moral philosophy. So...
Yep. And if you like this episode and you want to share it, please do. If you want to share other episodes with friends, that would be greatly appreciated because we love you very much deep down in our hearts.
That's one of the great things about our show is that you don't have to start at the beginning. You can jump in and wherever you want.
Yep.
Like, for instance, if you saw Wonder Woman, you wanted to talk to somebody about it, listen to our podcast on Wonder Woman.
Yep.
If you saw... The Handmaid's Tale, and you really wanted to talk to somebody about it, listen to our 2 podcasts on The Handmaid's Tale and talk to us about it. Because that's what we do. We talk to people about pop culture.
That's our thing.
Yeah, so find us on social media. Give us a call at that phone number. Again, that's 720-372-3879. And if you want to talk to us about any of those things, and leave us a message. And we may even do like a listener podcast where we actually take your points and we talk to you. We'll talk to you your point and we'll discuss it with you. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at Real Honest Faith is the one for the show. And you can also find us on Tumblr and on Reddit and on our website, thehonestfaith.com. You can also buy my book there if you would like to find out about my grieving process through my loss of my jobs with the church. So that is available from Amazon. So you can either go search for it or you can direct link it from our website. And with all of that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.